Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, March 13th to order. Ms. Rodriguez, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Peugeot.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Jordan.
Here.
Commissioner Campanella.
Here.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Here.
Vice Chair Thompson. Here. Chair Schwartz.
Here. Thank you very much. It's great to have everyone with us today. Our first order of business are the preliminary matters. So we have a couple of documents to review and approve. The first is the draft minutes of February 13th, followed by Resolution 005-14, which is a recommendation to the City Council for air quality design standards for development near Highway 101. With that, do we have any abstentions or recusal on review of those items?
Madam Chair, I'll be abstaining from both, but I'll have a comment on the resolution before you vote on it.
Okay. All right, so let's turn to the draft minutes first of February 13th. Any comments, corrections?
Make a motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
And abstain.
Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, we'll move on to the next one. Resolution 005-14. I've already read the title, so we'll just turn to that document, and I'll ask if the commissioners have any corrections. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve without corrections? So moved. Ms.
Second.
Lodge? Mr. Thompson? All those in favor?
I have a,
Aye.
I have a comment, please.
Mr. Jordan?
So I have to abstain on this because I wasn't present, but I was at the first discussion meeting on this. This spanned 2 meetings, and watched the subsequent meeting on tape after it happened. And I was pretty vocal at the first meeting on some points that I thought were missing from the recommendation forward to council, and I just wanted to make it clear that I thought that staff and commission did a great job of reconciling the issues of concerns that I had, and if I could support this formally, I would. So I'm just sorry it can't be 7-0.
Okay, so noted. Thank you so much. So we've, I think, completed our vote. You have what you need, Ms. Rodriguez, on that one? I do. Okay, excellent. So let's move on Our next item, turn to Ms. Brooke, is any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items?
No, Madam Chair.
Any announcements or appeals?
I do have a couple of announcements regarding some upcoming council agenda items. Next week at their March 18th meeting, the council will be considering approval of the Mission Canyon Community Plan. That was an item that the Planning Commission saw jointly with the County Planning Commission in November last year. And on March 25th, the council will be considering proposed ordinance amendments regarding fences, walls, screens, and hedges. Also, of interest to the Planning Commission, although it wasn't a project that came before you, is 510 North South Sepuedes Street. That's the People's Self-Help Housing Project on South Sepuedes and Haley. Had been previously appealed when it received ABR project design approval. It's been appealed again with final approval, and that's tentatively scheduled for April 29th at City Council.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question to the commission. For the council meetings on March 18th and 20th that Ms. Brooke just identified, though a Planning Commission representative is not required, does anybody at this time feel inclined to attend and speak as a commissioner? I just wanted to get a sense of whether or not there's a sort of a pressing interest. Okay, so if there is, if you could just let Ms. Brooke and I know, we're going to try to coordinate some of those going forward, and we'll have more discussion at upcoming lunch meetings about that. Very good. Okay, are there any comments from members of the public today on items that are not on our agenda?
No.
Ms. Brooke, no. Okay, let's move right along. We're so pleased today to have the Creek Division staff with us, and it looks like, Mr. Benson, you'll be providing the presentation. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll just let you take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, for inviting us today to give a presentation on the Creeks Division's stormwater infiltration demonstration projects, and specifically permeable paver projects that we've installed throughout the city. My name is Cameron Benson. I'm the city's Creeks Division manager. I'd also like to introduce Tim Burgess, who is a water resources specialist with the Creeks Division. He was a project manager for these projects, so he'll be speaking about some of the technical aspects of the project today. And also Laura Yanez, who is a project engineer with the City Public Works Department and part of our project design team. As most of you know, the number one source of surface water contamination in the city of Santa Barbara is non-point source pollution, or stormwater and urban runoff that carries hydrocarbons, bacteria, metals, nutrients, and sediment into the creeks and ocean untreated. And what many people don't know is that the city is regulated for all of that stormwater discharge. So everything that runs off of the city and into the creeks and ocean is regulated under the Federal Clean Water Act. The city is required to have a permit to have a storm drain system that discharges into the creeks and the ocean, and that's a permit. Our regulators are the State Water Resources Control Board and the Regional Water Quality Board. And as part of that permit, the city is required to develop and adopt and implement a stormwater ordinance, and we've done that, and that is part of the municipal code, and it includes standards for stormwater runoff discharge from private and public properties for all development and redevelopment that takes place in the city. The city's also developed a stormwater best management practice guidance manual that has a lot of different tools that private property owners and public builders can implement to meet the water quality standards. Our project objectives with these water quality projects are first of all, to do a demonstration project. The Creeks Division isn't really in the business of redoing all of the infrastructure throughout the city, but we wanted to do some demonstration projects on how these water quality friendly projects could be built in large public areas, in sort of the ubiquitous urban infrastructure we have, parking lots, streets, alleys, and so forth. The projects are all designed to improve stormwater quality. These are permeable paver projects. So what happens when we have that stormwater runoff is it runs right through the surface of the permeable pavers into the soil below. where it can infiltrate and microbes in the soil can provide treatment for those pollutants. The projects are all designed to comply with the standards in the city's stormwater ordinance as well as in our state permit and with the Clean Water Act. And then lastly, there are incidental benefits to groundwater recharge and also for localized flooding in the project areas. As we're looking for locations to site these projects, we look for things such as slopes. Permeable pavers and infiltration type BMPs tend to work better on a flatter surface, but they can be installed in areas where there are slopes. It just gets more difficult as the slopes get steeper and steeper. You have to have the right soil types. What we found is most of the soils throughout Santa Barbara work very well for these kind of infiltration BMPs. We always look for a lack of any kind of contamination. We don't want to spread any kind of groundwater or soil contamination plumes. And then because these are demonstration projects, we're looking for high visibility areas where the public can see them and also geographic diversity around the city. We chose to use permeable pavers as compared to other types of BMPs for these, because they're very effective. If any of you have seen any of these projects in action when we've for example, brought a water truck out, or you've seen them during a storm, they can handle a lot of water and it just passes right through the surface. They don't create any runoff. They also have minimal maintenance, and you can maintain them to maintain your permeability easily. So, for example, as compared to permeable concrete that is poured in place, when that permeable concrete gets clogged, you have no way to backflush that system. You get the fines in there, and then you've got a clog. Where with the pavers, we can clean out the joints, and if it really became very, very clogged, you take the paver out, you clean the fines out, and you can put the pavers back in place. And then they're very long-lasting. These are concrete pavers. They'll have a lifespan equivalent to poured concrete, which should be 70-plus years. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim Burgess to give you some of the details about the project.
In 2011, the city constructed the Mackenzie Park Stormwater Infiltration Project, and this project was designed to direct all of the runoff from the 35,000 square foot lot into these permeable paver basins. And a hybrid design was used here, where the parking spaces were where the basins were, and the driving portions of the parking lot were asphalt. And this was in an attempt to reduce upfront capital costs. This does, however, increase ongoing maintenance costs associated with maintaining asphalt. In 2013, the city received a grant from the State Water Resources Control Board to pay for 80% of a stormwater infiltration project. And the city selected 6 sites to install permeable pavers, and the approach that was done here was an all-paver design, no asphalt hybrid. And this was what this does is this eliminates the need to excavate so deeply because the whole area is being you're not collecting runoff from another area, and you don't have to have an extra large basin to handle that runoff. And also, it eliminates the ongoing asphalt maintenance, and you get the benefit of the durability of permeable concrete pavers for the entire life of the project. And so this was done at Stevens Park parking lot, at Cannon Drive, the West Side Neighborhood Center parking lot at West Victoria Street and Euclid Avenue, the Oak Park Tennis Court parking lot on Talent Road, the Oak Park main area, which includes these are the plans up here, the horseshoe pits, the parking lot, the stage area, and the picnic grounds over here. And so in all, including all these projects, over 135,000 square feet of runoff has basically been eliminated and is now infiltrates into the ground. So these projects were built on public facilities, and they're built to handle large loads from fire trucks, from tree trimming trucks, commercial trucks, and even, as in the case of Mackenzie Park during Fiesta, the large tractor trailers that bring in the rides. And so those are done. That's done because the concrete pavers themselves are made of concrete cured in a controlled environment, so they're really strong, even stronger than standard outdoor poured concrete. And beneath those pavers, you have a base that basically spreads that load out onto the subgrade, the native soil underneath. And so, as you can see in the model that we have up here, and also in this diagram, you can see what's underneath these pavers. And so, when you have you have the pavers on top, and the gaps in between each paver, where the rainfall can come through. And here is a layer of the base material, the rock, and it doesn't have any sand in between it, so it has a void space to be able to percolate that water through, and also provide storage in the event that the rainfall rate exceeds the infiltration rate. So it's this temporary storage to allow for the water to infiltrate, give it time to infiltrate into this subgrade. This is the native soil underneath. And so what you have is, we've built these as in public facilities. So up here you can see it's quite a deep cross-section. If you were to do this in a driveway or a pedestrian area, you wouldn't need to build that so deeply. And even at the Mackenzie Park pathways, if you just take those first 2 layers of rock, that's how deep we made the pathways, because they're not designed to handle tremendous loads. Even though trucks drive on them all the time, the park's trucks, and it's not a big deal. But and so to continue on to this model here, once the water percolates through the rock, you've got this level subgrade. The water spreads out and pools up, doesn't create any runoff by moving around underneath there. And so, as Cameron mentioned, if you have a site that is slightly sloped on the surface, you can lower your costs by not having to excavate so deep on the uphill side and create a terraced subgrade. And these terraces, so the subgrade up here, and then it drops down to here. So these terraces are separated by concrete edge restraints. And these essentially create basins, as shallow as can be designed for the loading that they take. And we got the basis for these designs. These were all done by our engineering division, but they got a lot of the basis and the information from the Interlocking Concrete Pavement Institute. And this is a nonprofit organization that has a lot of information on concrete pavers themselves and a lot of information on permeable concrete pavers. And they provide example guidelines, specifications, and they have a lot of case studies. And so it's really worth checking out when doing a project like this. Before our project began, as specified by the ICPI and also by our technical guidance manual, we did pre-construction site assessment, where we analyzed the soil for soil type and contamination, groundwater depth to make sure it was deep enough, and then also infiltration rates. And we tested those infiltration rates. And all of the infiltration rates, as Cameron mentioned, they varied throughout the site, and even in cases where the soil map showed that it shouldn't be possible to infiltrate, or it's really tight sea soils there, we found the soils handled the infiltration fine. And this was validated during this last storm event that we had a couple of weeks ago. We put in monitoring wells in these projects, and they're wells that go down from the surface to the subgrade. And it's a perforated PVC pipe, and we can open up a cap and see what the water level is inside these basins. So inside this, as it fills up with rain, you can see what the level of the water is underneath there. And we use water level loggers that log the data, and then we download it. And and basically on the far right, those numbers are very similar to what we had tested on the site initially. And so this is the kind of chart that we get out of that test. And I'll just briefly go through this. This is the red line is, well, first of all, this is about Thursday to Monday morning. And so this red line is the rainfall accumulation over that storm. And on the right here is the inches of rain. So we got, between 5 and 6 inches for that whole entire rainstorm. And the blue line is the height of the water inside these basins. And you can see when the rainfall rate was not as heavy, it was infiltrating all the way, and then as it intensified, the basin started to fill up, and it got to, say, 1.5, 2 inches here, up to 3 inches here. And so keep in mind the total basin depth is 15 inches on all of these basins. So they handled all of the water that was rained on them. And so this is the Oak Park stage. another graph. We did this for all the sites, but West Side Neighborhood Center actually takes runoff from the roof of the center and the walkways, so you get a little more runoff, and so you see a higher water levels inside there. So it's 4.5 up to 6 inches at the West Side Neighborhood Center. Did this for all the sites. All of that rainfall that fell on that during that big storm was infiltrated. And so the take home for these projects that we learned from this is 5 real important components of these projects. And the first thing is having a level subgrade on a project of this size. You don't want that water moving around underneath and potentially eroding subgrade soils. And it also provides a maximum infiltration by utilizing higher infiltration areas where the rainfall pools up. And it's all constrained by these edge restraints in these basins. And on the right here, you can see how it's terraced. And another thing is, as I mentioned before, open graded crushed aggregate base. And what that means is crushed aggregate is angular. So it's angular rocks, so they lock together really well in the absence of a sand, and because they don't have sand in between them. And it creates a void space to hold that water. And the compaction for this type of base is different for standard road base because it has to be done in layers. It has to be compacted in 6-inch layers. And so it's done with a vibratory 10-ton roller and on the edges a plate compactor. And we hired an outside contractor to test the compaction rates before we moved on to each additional lift to ensure that we don't get any sagging on these projects later on. And another important thing is to secure the utilities underneath there to prevent damage to them when you're compacting and also prevent any leaks from your basins into them. So this is a sewer lateral at Stevens Park. We covered this with a 2-sack slurry to keep the rocks from breaking that pipe. And we also, at the end of the project, tested that pipe for, we did a pressure test on it to make sure that it wasn't compromised. And then this is a storm drain box at the West Side Neighborhood Center, a 2-part box. It's sealed on the inside, but before we put that second layer on, we put a mastic, a type of caulk on there, on here and on the inside and the outside to ensure that the water doesn't leak through there. And the last thing is to use true permeable pavers that have a high infiltration rate themselves, so the water can pass through easily. And so these have gaps in between them, and so that water can go through. And even if the paver gaps, like Cameron mentioned, the water truck, tremendous amount of water gets infiltrated quickly. If these gaps get clogged with a little bit of debris, you still have a high infiltration rate because you start with such a high infiltration rate to begin with. And there is one of the bricks, one of the concrete pavers is right up there. And I'll turn it back to Cameron to conclude.
Thanks, Tim. So one of the questions we get about these projects often is the cost, and how does the cost compare to other surfaces that are normally used for this type of project. And so we've worked with our Public Works Department to come up with this table. And when you look at this table, one of the things I should say, all of these costs, we tried to get apples to apples as much as possible. All of these are redevelopment costs because we're coming in and retrofitting something where there's an existing parking lot. So this includes removal and recycling of the surface that was there, the existing surface, and your excavation and everything for both of these. So if you're coming into a new development situation, these costs would be lower. But these are redevelopment costs. One of the things that jumps right out and starts, and when you look at this, is the pavers come in at $17 a square foot, asphalt at $11.25, and concrete at $18.50 a foot. Asphalt appears to be a lot cheaper than the other materials, but then when you look at the lifespan of those materials, all of a sudden asphalt starts to not look so good anymore. The permeable pavers and the concrete both last 70-plus years. To have an asphalt parking lot for that length of time, a standard lifespan for an asphalt parking lot is about 30 years. So you're into 2+ asphalt parking lots in the lifespan of one permeable paver parking lot. Some of the maintenance issues that come up, with permeable pavers, you have very limited maintenance from looking at a parking lot perspective, but one of the things we have to go out and ensure is that we maintain the permeability of the pavers. That was our point in putting them in. So they'll still work as a parking lot if they're not permeable, but it's sort of defeats the purpose. So that is a maintenance issue. Our estimate for that, I mean, we put Mackenzie Park in over 3 years ago now, and we've had no maintenance costs, but we do need to get out there and start doing some maintenance. So our estimated cost for that is about $2,500 a year per 100,000 square feet of area. With asphalt, the standard public works practice is slurrying the asphalt every 5 to 6 years, and then replacement at 30 years. So that is a ongoing maintenance cost of asphalt. And then with concrete, you have essentially the same maintenance as the permeable pavers as a concrete surface, but with poured concrete, if you have utilities running underneath your project and you need to repair, say, a water line or a sewer line underneath that, you have to saw cut the concrete all the way across your parking lot, dig down, repair your utility, and then redowel in new concrete, or because that's expensive and difficult, what usually happens is you get an asphalt strip running down the center of your concrete paving. So it can be very expensive to maintain utilities underneath, whereas with the permeable pavers, you can actually take the pavers out, take your rock material out, fix the utility, put the same rock back in, and put the pavers back into place, and you don't need any new materials. And then you have the water quality requirements to meet. Permeable pavers meet the water quality requirements. Asphalt and concrete do not, so you have to come up with some other type of BMP to meet those requirements, which is going to cost some additional money or space and will have its own maintenance requirements. So if you look over the lifespan of a project, the permeable pavers start to look like a pretty good investment. So our next steps with our demonstration projects is Creeks Division is getting itself out of the parking lot business, and we're looking at some of the other urban hardscapes areas that these permeable pavers might be appropriate for. And we're looking at a project that is a streets, sidewalks, and alleys project. And we've identified some areas for each of those things. We're looking at a 2-block long section of Quarantina Street between Ortega and Canon Perdido over by Santa Barbara Junior High. We're looking at the sidewalks around Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens, and then the alley that goes through Plaza Veracruz Park. We've applied for grant funds for this project. There's a Proposition 84 funded stormwater grant program. We just submitted our application last month, and we will hear in May whether we're successful with that. If we are successful, we'll begin construction on the alley and the sidewalks in the summer of 2015, and on the Quarantina Street portion of the project in the summer of 2016. And so with that, I'll conclude, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. Well, gosh, this project and the implementation has been so timely with our extreme drought conditions. So I'll bring it back to the commission for maybe questions and comments at the same time, only because this is such an informal item for us today. Who would like to start? Mr. Campanella?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I visited the site when you did your demonstration out at Oak Park, along with Commissioner Schwartz, and I think it was pretty amazing the way that water got picked up and didn't splash or run off or anything. It was just an amazing sight. A question, I think, and I'm going to defer to Commissioner Bartlett a little bit too, who's designing projects at this time, is I believe at March 1st, projects within California, your requirement is not only to detain water runoff, but also to retain it on sort of a permanent basis. The rules are getting stricter in that regard. So some of the solutions that are being looked at in new projects now could be very expensive, either the mechanical way that you do it or how you capture it, as well as utilization of land. So since we're in a primarily urban environment and you're redeveloping, I think the ability to do pavers on your surface parking maybe saves a lot of money, both in infrastructure costs plus also in land cost. And when it's appropriate, I'd like Commissioner Bartlett's comment on that as well, because he's designing projects. The other question is, I guess, if this is a real good solution, maybe at some point we can see or be educated by the building department that various alternatives that an applicant may come up with to satisfy their stormwater retention versus maybe some bioswales or small things like that on site. What's an acceptable practice that they would approve so that when reviewing larger projects, when an applicant comes in, we can have some knowledge on conditions, et cetera, that are being put on the project. So appreciate the time on that.
Why don't we just go right on down the line? There are a number of lights on. Mr. Jordan.
Madam Chair, would you like me to
yes, please.
respond to a
This
couple
is
of those things?
interactive, so jump in as
if you want
discussion here.
If you want to make comments first or something, that's fine, but
no, please.
it may be most efficient. So the March 1st requirements are going into effect for just about every city in the state. Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara has a different program. We have, because the city got started early with dealing with stormwater pollution in development and redevelopment projects, we had already established a program here in the city that began to be implemented in 2007 and became a regulatory program in 2009. And what we did was we worked with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and also the State Board as they were adopting their new permit to allow an exception for a community that had developed a program already that was providing as good or better water quality protection than the state-developed program. So our program here in Santa Barbara is a little bit different than that. Essentially what we traded was it applies to more projects, but with less draconian measures, and we think overall provides better water quality protection for the city. So we have a little different program than some of the places outside of here. And then with regard to suggestions for best management practices for stormwater, for different things, like I said, we did develop a manual. There are dozens of different size options as well as different types of BMPs that can be employed. And this is a guidance manual only. Nobody has to use anything in here as long as you can meet the requirements with whatever you're proposing. That works. These are just here for guidance and suggestion.
Jordan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple questions, and one would be I think you're downselling yourself, because I'd like to hear a little, I'll just lob the softball out. I'd like to hear a little bit about your historical success with grants and why you've been so successful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jordan. As Mr. Burgess mentioned, the Creeks Division overall has been very successful with grants. We pursue them very aggressively and try to leverage all of the Measure B funds that we get as much as possible to benefit the community. With this particular project, we tried for grants for some time when we were building the Mackenzie Park project, and we weren't quite able to get there. And so we built the project anyways as a demonstration and as a show of our ability to get a project like that done. And it really ended up paying off for us. We got to use that sort of as leverage to get into the program. And as Tim mentioned, the last project we built, 80% of the project was funded with Proposition 84 funding. The project that we have the grant application in for now would be the same thing. It would be a 20% local match, 80% grant funded. And it's a significant amount. For this project, it was our grant award was almost $1.9 million, and what we're looking for in the next round is about $2.3 million.
And I knew that already, too. Just wanted to get you a chance to wave that flag. On that slide 22 you had where the little matrix there, I just want to chide you a little bit and make sure I understand. But that column that has water quality requirement, or I think, compliance with water quality regs, really doesn't do the justice to what the differentiation is between those. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I still think in our setting, I think it's true that the number one problem with water quality runoff is still automobile-based. That's right, isn't it?
That's part of the problem. I mean, we have nutrients, bacteria, but metals and hydrocarbons certainly.
I think the water board will tell you on a statewide basis they think it's automobile-based. So I just don't like the phrasing of compliance, because that's not the whole story. It's not just about complying. The reason there is a regulation is because we're recognizing that the auto and parking lots cause this tremendous problem to water quality, and I think there's probably some ignorance out there in the fact that people think they just drive a car and they go over a road and nothing happens after they leave that road, but it leaves stuff there that gets washed off. There's a ton of cars, there's a lot of accumulation, and then especially a first flush storm has horrible effects on the water quality. So it's not just about complying with regulations, but it's also about looking to where to see the most leverage and bang for the buck to help that water quality. That'd be a good soapbox moment.
Yeah, that's true. And that's part of when we did the Mackenzie Park design, there was some hesitancy to invest the dollars, and that's why we did that hybrid design, because the asphalt was a little cheaper up front. It's going to cost us probably more in the long run, but we designed the permeable areas in the parking stalls because that's where you get your oil drips and stuff. So same theory, we're trying to get the biggest bang for the buck. This photo kind of is very typical of what you see after a storm, and you can see the oil sheen across the top here that's clearly coming from oil and
then
gasoline
I'd like
drips.
to compliment you also because, as you know, in this region, you guys are held as a model practically for at the regional board level for the work that you've done. We call that the Santa Barbara exception, don't we, with the recent legislation. And it's clear that we're way out in front of other people. Other people are grudgingly coming along, and we're held up both with our program and our manuals as references that are shared with both other municipalities in our region and out of the region. And I think a lot of that has to do with your leadership and your staff. So just want to commend you for that, too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My compliments also on the fine job your division's been doing. Alice Keck Park. In the park is this proposal to replace, I think it's decomposed granite. That's on the pathways there now.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lodge, no, the proposal is actually the sidewalks that surround the park. We're not going to be doing any work inside of the park. And so
I would think rain stormwaters would kind of go through the decomposed granite anyway.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, and we have a whole bunch of extra slides. Tim, can you help me out and find the slide? It's all the way at the end, I think. We have a lot of decomposed granite in the city, and I think that one of the problems that we have with it, it's often mixed with something to hold it in place a little bit better, some kind of glue or something like that makes it essentially impermeable. But a worse problem for us is, the sediment itself getting into the creeks is a problem, but sediment also serves as sort of a host, I guess, for other pollutants. Other pollutants absorb to the sediment and get washed into the creeks and into the ocean easier. So this is a photo of Mackenzie Park before our project, and I mentioned localized flooding. This is the scene of what Mackenzie Park always looked like after a 1-inch rainstorm, and right now we have basically no runoff off of Mackenzie Park. So this flooding is gone, but then you can see there used to also be a decomposed granite roadway here that went over to the ball fields, and every time we'd get a rain, it would turn into kind of a muddy river, and the parking lot would fill with decomposed granite. And so we're going to have that issue at Alice Keck Gardens, or Alice Keck Park Gardens, a little bit with some of that decomposed granite coming down the stairs and across our parking lots, or across our sidewalks. But we decided not to try to replace things within the park right now. It has a certain aesthetic there, and we're preserving that, but trying to do a demonstration around there for the sidewalks.
Okay, so the sidewalks around Alice Keck Park then will become permeable pavers?
Correct.
That will certainly be a different look, which I think would be nice, but and, that will be different. When I came in and saw this huge column, and I was thinking about the homeowners who might be interested in who either have driveways that need replacement or new projects might be considering this, but it's you don't need to go down in a home setting. You don't need this kind of depth under the certain. So, did I understand correctly? It's about 8 inches that you need to go down.
Correct. I misstated that when I mentioned 8 inches to you before the meeting, as Tim pointed out at Mackenzie Park. So where this this decomposed granite path was at Mackenzie Park, we saw that as a problem clogging our pavers. So when we went in to do our project, we replaced that decomposed granite with permeable pavers. And based on the loads that road carries, which are park maintenance trucks, we put 6 inches of gravel underneath the pavers, and that's sufficient to support that kind of thing. So as long as fire trucks and trash trucks and things like that don't need to use your driveway to fight a fire there, and they can do that from the street, 6 inches of rock-based material is sufficient.
And I should add that if you do drive a fire truck over that, it's not going to destroy it. It's just that it's a lot less frequently used by those big loads. And I believe the Mackenzie Park, the big trucks that go through to deliver the rides actually drive through that area to the grass. And so occasional use is fine, even with the 6-inch load. We just we really built these to be solid and not fail over a long period of time in the parking lots.
And from the water quality standard perspective, 4 inches is sufficient because about every 4 inches of gravel you can hold an inch rainstorm, which is the standard that you have to meet. So where we're looking at 18 inches, we're actually able to hold more than 3 times because we're building these for structural support. We're actually able to hold 3 times more than the standard requires.
Okay, one other question. You mentioned that this really only works basically on level terrain. Is there a certain percentage grade above which it just is impractical and it just runs off?
Well, I didn't want to state that too strongly. It works best when you have a level surface, but you can install it in slopes. And this photo on the lower left shows the entrance to Stevens Park, and it's a pretty significant slope for a short distance. And what we did is that you want your soil, your subgrade underneath the gravel to be level. So in those cases, you're putting your edge restraints, your walls closer together, and you're creating a level floor. And then on one side it's tall, and the other side's shorter, and you can put your pavers in like that. It's fine. It's just that you end up having to do a lot of excavation. You have to build taller walls, so the costs start to go up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam
Mr. Thompson, any questions or comments?
And I just wanted to add, if you go to the ICPI website, they actually have drawings for designing these things on steeper slopes as well. And like Cameron said, just having the grade breaks. So it is possible to be done.
I just want to thank you for taking the time to explain this all to us. There's one other point that came to mind while you were talking that you didn't bring up, and that is appearance and aesthetics. I think most people would say that pavers look much, much better than a slab of asphalt or a plain slab of concrete. So they're functional as well as look better. So that's maybe not anything that goes into determining whether or not you use it, but it probably goes into determining acceptance.
Commissioner Thompson, I personally agree with you, but it's a subjective thing, and so I don't want to include that in a presentation and then have people say, well, I'd prefer something else. So, but thank you.
Mr. Bartlett, questions, comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thank you for a great presentation. being a practicing architect and trying to deal with all the changing regulations. You know, there's a lot of questions that come up, and every project is different, especially, you know, in Santa Barbara, which isn't level, and we have floodplains and high water tables and all the other odd constraints. So I have a kind of a list of questions. Obviously, on the future projects you're looking at, you're using it for sidewalks. So I'm assuming that the pavers that you're using are ADA compliant so that high heels aren't sticking into the gaps?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bartlett, I'm not sure high heels and ADA always go together in my mind, but yes, the manufacturer sells these as ADA compliant. I think more importantly to us was how are they actually going to perform? And you know, we've had the Mackenzie Park in now for several years. We've had the West Side Neighborhood Center in for 9 months or so. There's a lot of handicap access needs in that facility, and then at Oak Park as well. And we've had the opportunity to speak with a number of people who are actually in wheelchairs and having to navigate these. And every single person we've spoken with so far, which is all of them that we see, we always ask, have said that the pavers have been much easier to navigate than asphalt. And the reason for that is the asphalt cracks and alligators pretty quickly after it's installed. So they've got big cracks to try to get through. And then something that I hadn't noticed before is asphalt often, you know, it's unravels. So there's little rocks on top of the asphalt all the time. They're hard to see because they're the same color as the asphalt, but you get your wheels stuck in those, or your walker or your cane, and it can be a challenge. So every single person we've had the opportunity to ask, we have, and we've had really positive feedback on that.
So most installations of pavers that you see around town, they always spread sand over the surface, vibrated in, which I would think would kind of destroy a lot of the permeable nature of the material because you're filling in the joints. I think on the installations you're showing, those were not sanded joints?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Bartlett, that's exactly right. That's why we repeated that point over and over. You guys have the opportunity to see a lot of these projects coming forward. We really need your help in making sure people understand that these are locked together. You know, if you want to pass that brick down, you can see how the brick itself creates these open joints, and then there's some small aggregate that goes into those joints. We don't want sand because sand is going to capture the fines and clog these faster. You know, sand itself is permeable, but it'll capture those fines and clog. It'll just clog up faster, and it takes up some of the void space that we would like to have for the water storage.
And I appreciate the exhibit that you brought. I think that really makes it apparent how the system works. I guess my question is, would you not use a filter fabric under the lower layer of coarse rock to keep the wet soil underneath from floating up and silting in the voids that you're relying on for water storage?
We've decided, some people do use the filter fabric. The ICPI, I think, describes it as optional. Our concern with putting the fabric down is just the opposite, that you would have fines that get in through the top and eventually work their way down to the bottom and will clog the fabric and create an impermeable layer at the bottom of the system. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, since most of the water when rainfall goes down, you know, typically just goes right down. Depends on the permeability of the soil, but for the most part, ICPI considers it as optional, given that the rainfall goes down. Therefore, the percolation allows the soil to stay down.
A good explanation. Have you considered doing a demonstration project in the Historic Landmarks District where they frown upon concrete pavers?
How do I answer that? The project that we've proposed in Plaza de Veracruz Park is, I guess it's just outside the El Pueblo Viejo district, but it is on the list of potential historic sites, and so we had to take that project to HLC. They made findings on that project that the pavers would not have an adverse effect on the historic resource, so that was approved. We took two other potential project sites to them. One was Arlington Avenue between Anacapa and State Street in front of the Arlington. And I want to characterize this fairly. There was a mixed response from commissioners at HLC on support for pavers there. I think ultimately there was a majority support for pavers in the roadway and on the sidewalks there. It's just that the commissioners at HLC requested an artful design within the pavers that went beyond what our streets division was comfortable with in terms of, streets division is going to have to maintain these. So if they have to fix some utilities underneath, and they had a difficult design to replace bricks in a certain pattern, they felt like that was too much of a challenge. So we couldn't quite get there. But I think to get to your question, I think that HLC was open to that. We also were looking at an alley off of Laguna Street, and the HLC commissioners had a lot of special design considerations that they would have liked to seen there, and we just couldn't get to a point where everybody could agree on that design, and so we ended up outside of the EPV with the final the locations we finally selected.
I've had several projects that are in flood zones. Now, there you have a different situation. Obviously you have high water and you almost have exfiltration rather than infiltration. We've seen requirements for permeable pavers where actually you're going to have a problem with the moisture coming up and creating a dangerous situation for pedestrians. Is there a certain infiltration rate for the soil that you need before permeable pavers are effective? I mean, if it's not going to infiltrate, it seems like it's kind of going the wrong direction.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Bartlett. Yes, we do have guidelines in the guidance manual. Basically is, on the low end, it's 0.05 inches an hour, which gets you to about 1.2 inches every 24 hours. The standard that we have to meet under our permit is 1 inch every 24 hours. So 0.05 inches an hour is very slow infiltration. And then we have a top end for that if it's very sandy. But what we found is even in areas where you have high levels of clay in your soil, you're usually finding something that's well above that 0.05 inches, and it works. One of the things I forgot to put in our site selection list there was depth to groundwater, and that's always something that we look at. Generally, I think our guidance manual calls for 5 feet to high groundwater, 5 feet of soil to high groundwater from the subgrade level. And so if you're truly in a place with very high groundwater, this type of infiltration BMP is probably not appropriate there. But we are we're on the Lower East Side in locations we've already gone out and done our testing. So, over Quarantina is over near the old Estero boundary, and we went down, did we go 10? 10, we looked down 10 feet there. There's actually a project that was done nearby that actually went a little deeper than that and didn't hit any groundwater. So we feel comfortable. We're going to be looking we're going to be going 18 inches deep with our project. So that gives us 8+ feet. So in some of those, it's a site-specific analysis, and you really can't look at a soil map and say we can't infiltrate here, or a groundwater table map, because those boundaries are sometimes not as specific as we'd like, and you have to do your site-specific analysis to look at whether this is going to be appropriate.
We have also seen requirements from Creeks Division on projects where we're proposing underground parking with concrete podium deck above, putting permeable pavers on top of the concrete podium, which seems like it's a non-starter. There's nothing to be permeable, so...
Yeah, what most of the, just about every study we finds that you get all of your water treatment in the top 18 inches of soil. So we put a 5-foot guidance to groundwater here, but you could probably get by with 18 inches. We've seen these in other communities where you're on top of a parking lot or essentially a green roof type of situation. That's basically what that is it's a green roof, but not one you have to maintain landscaping on. And you could actually use it for parking or for a deck or something like that. And you could have soil underneath that with an underdrain that allows the water to pass through the soil and then drain off.
Right, so only if you covered the concrete with enough soil, does that make any sense then?
If you covered the top of your parking lot with, yes.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you very much.
Cujo.
Thank you, and this was really very interesting and obviously timely as well. So I did have a question about clay soils, but I believe that you probably just answered that with Commissioner Bartlett's questions. So the only other item that I wanted to ask you about are the resources available through the Creeks Division and the city for homeowners or others who are thinking about installing permeable pavers of this sort, and what would be the easiest way for them to find out additional local information, including where local supplies are available.
So the technical guidance manual that the city has is available online and through the Creeks Division website, and that provides a lot of resources. And as far as sourcing materials, you know, we've sourced these materials in large quantities and gotten them from large manufacturers. But I know that there are local retail areas that sell these types of, like I think it's Santa Barbara Stone on Milpa Street, and they provided us with samples and helped us kind of develop this project, and we got bids from them. And so they have a lot of these types of materials available over there if you're going to kind of retail type shopping for this type of thing. But our website has a lot of information on these things, and we're also available to speak to anybody if you had any specific questions.
Right.
I think that's important because as we encourage the implementation, installation of these on private properties and city lots, I think it's important to have a lot of how-to and accessibility to information. It's one thing to read a manual. It's another thing to have someone actually explain to you what you need to read for. For example, my firm, in the work that we do, just worked with the County of Santa Barbara, and we had the good fortune, I suppose you could call it, of being the first project through under the new regulations. And so we sat with them, and they were very helpful, by the way, in walking me through and showing me exactly what was key and important as it applied to the project that I had. And so I hope those kinds of resources continue to be available, expand in their availability with the city, because I think that would be a good way of really starting to see this take off as people do their home projects. And also in that regard, in terms of resourcing and whatnot, the city, I would also recommend and encourage you to continue to work with local suppliers of materials, and also other agencies as well, which I'm sure you do. But since they're all kind of grappling with this issue at the same time, I think it would be great if there was good coordination in the long run. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I just say one last thing. With regard to staff, there are several staff members in the Planning Division who are familiar with these and can answer questions, and then several members of the Creeks Division staff who have worked on these and are familiar with them. So we have staff available to answer questions for design professionals or residents. I'd like to just give out a phone number to get into the Creeks Division, 897-2658. And we'll direct you to the right person depending on what the kind of question is that somebody might have. Thanks.
Thank you. I just have a few questions, and perhaps some closing thoughts. In terms of this technical guidance manual, that's what it's called. What, Mr. Thompson? Yeah. I'm wondering, and I don't know if Ms. Brooke wants to comment, how, from the planning side, when applicants come through kind of that process, how are they made aware of this being a tool for them or a resource for them for those kinds of projects?
Sure, Madam Chair. When we receive and review projects through a coordinated land development team review, or even those that only require design review, one of the staff's plan check corrections or information given back to the applicant is at what level of stormwater management do they need to comply, whether it's tier 1, 2, or 3. And then in that are detailed ways for the applicant to show compliance, whether it's just voluntary measures. Tier 2 might be disconnecting your downspouts, that sort of thing. But almost all times, we do provide a link or reference the stormwater guidance manual as the resource for showing people how to comply with the measures.
Or even beyond compliance, if they're interested in sort of being a superior model for this and going a little bit beyond for environmental and cost benefit purposes. So I'll comment on that when I get there. I do have a question about the demonstration projects. So I have the handout from the Oak Park ribbon cutting, and that was a wonderful event. Thank you so much. That was January 29th. On the back of the handout, there are photos, and you've shown some of them today, of the different park paver looks, the appearance of the different paving materials that we've used. So to some of the questions that the other commissioners have asked, I'm wondering how, and we can take this up at a lunch meeting if there's interest in further discussion, how we in the Planning Commission's course of business with applicants can provide them not just guidance, but tips as to local suppliers that, in fact, maybe even back to HLC to encourage their approval on some of these other projects, that there's a variety of appearances as well as materials that both accomplish the real environmental benefit and the aesthetic benefit that some are looking for. Because it may be a little different than what we've done in our public spaces and our parking lots. So I'd really like us to continue, as Mr. Jordan said, we're the leader and we're considered an exception. So I'd like us to sort of band together more. How can we sort of circle the wagons on this and try to encourage and incent all of the projects, public and private, to move more in this direction. And perhaps, today is not the day to figure that out. I'm just teeing that up for perhaps some more discussion. So one of my other questions then goes to the construction cost comparison slide that you have. So in the far right column, the compliance with water quality regulations, I'm curious how we or any other municipality could possibly justify putting in more asphalt or concrete when what I see in the far right column is that wouldn't even comply with water quality regulations. How is that even an option for anyone listening in and considering that, as opposed to going this new, more sustainable route with permeable pavers?
Well, so for example, there are other ways that you could comply. You could have you could surround a parking lot with a vegetated swale that kind of captures your water and drops it in. Nice. If we were to do that at Mackenzie Park, I think Mackenzie Park has about 75 parking spots. If we were to need to put a swale in around the entire perimeter of that, we would have had to shrink the parking lot. We might have lost a dozen of those, 15, 20% of the parking spaces. But there are other methods in place, but they can be pricey. You can treat your water in a flow-through proprietary treatment system, and so you can capture all your storm water into a drain and then run it through a filtered system. Those can be very, very expensive to maintain. We were just looking at a large development project in the city that was looking at one of those, and we were looking at annual maintenance costs between $15,000 and $20,000 for sediment removal and buying the filter pieces put in. I think the proponent or the applicants in that case are now looking at pavers as a way to for less cost, and certainly less cost going forward, we have a better system available.
I see. Then to the other urban hardscapes that you have on your next steps list, I'm curious if the 3 projects that you mentioned, are they $2.3 million, and that's part of the Prop 84, the new Prop 84 grant that you've just applied for that would cover all 3 of those projects? Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's correct. One thing to point out, I did throw some of the plans on here. I don't want to get into a lot of the detail, but one of the things that's really interesting, and I wish I could have blown this up better, but this is the 2 blocks of Quarantina Street. So you have Ortega down here and Cannon Perdido here and De La Guerra running through. One of the issues that we're having here is we have large Italian stone pines, probably 80-plus years old, along this block of the street. That's what it looks like from far away. Looks like the street's in pretty good condition, sidewalks on both sides. But then when you get in close, you can see, in this case, the roots are lifting that sidewalk probably 10 inches or more above its normal grade. So, and here also, they're coming out into the street. So what we've done is we've designed some expanded tree wells around these Italian stone pines. We think this is going to ultimately be much, much better for these large, mature street trees, but also because you won't have cars driving on the roots, you'll have any kind of water, including just incidental urban runoff from irrigation overspray coming in and watering the trees for us. But we'll also save on street repair from these kinds of things. What you have here is roots underneath this asphalt. They're coming up trying to get the moisture, the condensation underneath the asphalt surface at the top of the road base. And then what you end up with is, because of the weight of the cars and the irritation on the roots, they basically develop a callus or almost like a blister that ends up pushing up the asphalt there. So this, the Streets Division comes in here every 18 months or 2 years and has to do some pretty severe root pruning and is just constantly trying to repair the street. So we're trying to come up with a design that will reduce that maintenance, protect the trees, and also provide aesthetic benefits and water quality benefits.
And there's an avoidable cost that should go on our spreadsheet, so to speak, our overarching cost spreadsheet in terms of the cost-benefit analysis to moving in this direction. Okay, I think with a final comment, since we have another item, and I think Ms. Lodge would also wanted. Ms. Lodge, would you like to? No, please, go ahead before we
comment. Thank you, Madam Chair. It just seems, given that the pavers last more than twice as long as the asphalt, it's like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you go that way? Because the cost is cut by more than half.
In a lot of places, I think that's right. I'm not sure that these are going to work everywhere. These are demonstration projects. They're private. They're sort of pilot projects in a way. They've worked very well in parking lots. So I think in most parking lots, that's probably true. But in streets, for example, we picked a street that doesn't have high velocity traffic on it. And there's a major national study going on by the American Society of Civil Engineers looking at using pavers in higher speed locations, including even highways. So we'll see what the results of that look like. This is a low speed. Most of what we see from the ICPI folks is they say use them on streets that have velocities less than 35 miles an hour. This is a 25-mile-an-hour street, so we feel pretty much we're within that. So we'll hopefully we can put this in. We can see how it performs, and then see what options are available going forward.
I wasn't thinking of it as a replacement for asphalt for highways, but certainly parking lots and driveways. It seems like an efficient and economical way to go. Thank you.
Looks like there's some additional lights back on. You can tell this is a very exciting topic to the Planning Commission. Thank you, staff. Mr. Campanella, more thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it was a conversation on another subject that we were on this morning at a downtown parking committee, for example. Some areas, let's call them paseos, not, just passageways, but could be part of a paseo connectivity. We were talking about this morning, and one I know that I walk, for example, the passageway from the parking lot to State Street as you go to, let's say, the Granada Theater. You'd have to walk back through that alleyway. And when you get rain, there's nothing but water collected on that alleyway. The only way to get through it without getting wet is to try to meander along this high curb that's on the side of that alleyway. So I would maybe encourage to look at some of the pedestrian passages that are between parking lots and public spaces as really a priority, because you really have no alternative to get water out of there now. So I appreciate the projects you have, but I would suggest for perhaps safety benefit, the benefit of safety, you look at some of those paseos and access ways also. Thank you.
Pujo, you have your light on. Additional thoughts?
Just one final request. If we could have an electronic copy of the PowerPoint presentation sent to commissioners, that would be very helpful. Thanks.
So in closing, and again, thank you so much to the Creek staff and Public Works. I would like to suggest to the commission to consider, and Ms. Brooke, we can take this up at our March 20th lunch meeting if that's appropriate, how we can be more involved, appropriately involved and proactive, perhaps even in partnership with, say, Historic Landmarks Commission on the projects that do go to them, so that we can find ways to encourage this type of paving where it makes sense and in a way that would make HLC comfortable, because I think you can hear there that it really resonates with this commission, and we think it's the right way to move forward. It's a win-win-win as far as we can tell, and I think it's great that the city is being a leader on this. So thank you again, and unless there's anything else from the commission, we'll close this item. Appreciate
Thank you.
You being here today. We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess while staff prepares for our next item. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, I'm going to
yes, Mr.
go ahead
Jordan.
and recuse myself before you make me come back from break. The location of the next item is close enough to my residence to preclude my participation, so I'll be leaving today.
Okay, very good. We'll see you at our next meeting. Okay, 5-minute recess. Thank you, everyone.
Take me, I'm yours if you take me. Please, darling, away with me. Set my heart aflame. Dear me, I'm pleading for your I'm so hungry for love. Can't you feel the same? I don't ask for guarantee. Promise me not a thing. All I ask is, won't you please let me hear angels sing. So take me, though you may forsake me. Who cares if you take me and love me tonight?
public and all the commissioners would come take their seats, that would be great. We're going to start up again. And for the members of the public who are here for our next item, which is a new item, 2345 Edgewater Way, if you are interested in speaking today, please do fill out a public speaking slip and bring it to Ms. Brooke. Okay, so with that, I've already divulged the address. So Ms. Brooke or Ms. Broadison, would you like to begin with the staff presentation?
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Kelly Broadison with Community Development. And as you said, the project I'm presenting today is a two-story house at 2345 Edgewater Way. Project site is on the Mesa, and it's at the very end of Mesa Lane. It's right at the corner of Mesa Lane and Edgewater Way, and it's right adjacent to Mesa Lane steps. The project site is in the E3 single-family residence zone and the SD3 appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone, as well as the Hillside Design District. The 25,000 square foot bluff top lot is currently developed with a 2,100 square foot two-story residence. You can see here I'm showing a slide of the existing residence and the garage in the front. The applicant is proposing the demolition of the existing residence and construction of a two-story, 2,400 square foot single-family residence and a 420 square foot two-car garage. The first floor will be about 1,900 square feet, including the garage, and the second floor will be about 877 square feet. And the required applications for this project is a coastal development permit to allow the development in the appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone. And this proposed project is consistent with the regulations of the E3 zone regarding building height, setbacks, solar access, open yard requirements, and parking. Here I'm showing a site plan of the existing footprint. I tried to outline here the property lines and the footprint of the building, as I said, and the pink line here is the bluff top that is being recommended by the geologist. The project was reviewed for consistency with the local coastal plan. The project site is currently developed, as I said, with a single-family residence, and it's situated on an elevated marine terrace southeast of Mesa Lane. The southern portion of the property includes the sea bluff and beach area to the south. The LCP states that new development on the bluff top shall be placed at such a distance away from the edge of the cliff that normal rates of erosion and cliff material loss will not affect the structure during its expected lifetime. A preliminary geology report was conducted for this project that describes the geology on site and the potential for landslides and erosion, and the estimated average rate of bluff retreat. The report states that there is evidence of a mature landslide on or near the subject property, and the site-specific average bluff rate of 3 inches per year with a project design life of 75 years results in a minimum geologic setback of 18.75 feet. However, due to the potential for landslide activity on the site, the geologist has recommended a more conservative setback of about 110 to 122 feet. The proposed development will meet this more conservative setback by placing the pool approximately 110 feet from the top of bluff, and the new residence approximately 140 feet from the top of bluff. The site was also reviewed for consistency with the neighborhood. This project would remain consistency with the single-family residential development in the area because the project site is currently developed with a two-story residence, and the new residence will be closer to the street than the existing residence in order to provide the adequate setback. I didn't hear you. I know. I missed it. So in the staff report, I also provided a summary of the design review comments. The project was first reviewed on September 9th, 2013, and several neighbors showed up at the meeting and opposed the proposed design. And although the board appreciated the original design, and here I'm showing a site plan of the first design and the pool behind. Although the board appreciated the original design, they requested that the applicant restudy several aspects of the proposal, including the tower element, which you can see here in this elevation. Manipulating plate heights. They suggested a 7-foot plate height. Study methods to reduce the overall size and mass of the building as viewed from the public street, and lowering the height of the walls. Suggestions also included studying an increased setback from the street, recessing the second floor, revising the entry design to the courtyard to be neighborhood friendly. So the architect redesigned the project and returned to the SFDB on October 21st, 2013. And here I'm showing you a revised site plan. The applicant changed the style of the architecture from Spanish to Craftsman, revised the floor plan by relocating one of the rooms to the first floor. It was on the second floor, and they relocated it to the first floor. They reduced the size of the second story by approximately 270 square feet and eliminated the courtyard and tower elements and added a covered porch. Several neighbors spoke in support of the revised design, and the board found the revised architectural approach acceptable. This project will return to the full board for future design implementation, and any changes to the site can still be addressed at Single Family Design Board as it moves forward. Let's see. Again, going back to local coastal plan consistency, and I want to show some of these photos here. Here's the project showing the story poles from the street, and here's the project. Here's a slide showing the story poles from the Mesa Lane steps. LCP policies 2.1 and 2.4 serve to protect public access in coastal bluff areas. This project site is located immediately adjacent to the Mesa Lane steps, which provide the public with vertical access to the beach. And this new development will not inhibit the existing coastal access to or along the beach, and may actually make the entrance of Mesa Lane steps more visible to the public. The project was also reviewed for visual resources, and LCP policy 9.1 serves to protect existing views to, from, and along the ocean. The Coastal Act states that new development must be sited and designed to protect views along the scenic coastal area and minimize alteration of natural landforms. This new residence will be further away from the top of the bluff and closer to the street. Again, the Single Family Design Board has reviewed the proposed project and found that public views of the ocean would not be blocked. The project would remain visually compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and the character of the site. And the new residence is not likely to significantly impact public views to and from the ocean. In summary, the major coastal issues identified for this site were sea cliff retreat and flooding, maintaining and providing public access both vertically and laterally along the bluffs, preventing overuse of public facilities, and protection of recreational access. And this site does not serve as a public facility, recreation area, or public coastal access point. Visual resources and neighborhood compatibility of the project were further discussed in the staff report and at the SFDB meeting. And as proposed, the project can be found consistent with applicable policies of the Coastal Act, the local coastal plan, and all implementing guidelines. So in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project, approve the coastal development permit, making the findings in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A. We have the architect here, Jim Zimmerman, who's representing the property owner. We also have Denise Woolery here from the Single Family Design Board to summarize SFDB's review. And we have several letters regarding the project. Some of the letters are in opposition of the project, and some are in support of the project. And as you know, we did do story polls in a site visit. We had this applicant construct story polls. We conducted a site visit, and several of the SFDB members were able to make it out to the site and see the story polls. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Brodesson. Mr. Zimmerman, would you like to make a 15-minute or less presentation on behalf of the property owner and Of course, you don't need all that time, so don't feel pressed to use it, and you can always come back up to respond if the commissioners would like to engage you.
Denise is here from the Design Review Board, so would you like to?
I'll ask her at the beginning of public comment if she'd like to come up. Yes, thank you, but it's your turn right now.
Madam Chair and members of the Commissioner, we have a real problem with the site being that the structural setback cuts the existing house in half. And that means that you can't remodel it, you can't add on to it. When you look at the FAR, we're at 60%, recommended is 85%. What we've done on the second floor setbacks, the required, could you go to the site plan, Kelly? On the east side, the required setback is 6 feet, and we made it 8 feet to the second floor. And on the west side, we made the second floor with an 8-foot setback. So we've actually exceeded the 6-foot setback itself. Being that this is the structural setback, the property is 500 feet long, and we're only able to use 30% of that length. I think that we've conformed to the neighborhood guidelines. We've invited the neighbors over. Mr. Merstick is present, the owner. We invited them over with coffee and donuts in the morning. We had them there this morning and before the design review meeting, and explained the project with them. So I think we've tried to take care of the neighborhood concerns, the neighbors, and I would like to, going to the Craftsman design fits the neighborhood a little more, using the wood shingles and the board and bat. And I think that would, any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Any urgent questions from the commission before we go to public comment? We'll come back to the commission. Ms. Peugeot, urgent? No, we'll wait? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zimmerman. Okay. With that, let's go to public comment. Ms. Woolery, would you like to speak on behalf of the Single Family Design Board?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And
Thank you for
Commissioners.
being here today.
Yes, thank you. We first reviewed this, as was mentioned before, by Ms. Broderson on September 9th. I was not present for that meeting. I was on vacation and was surprised on October 21st to see a completely different plan being presented as a result of quite a lot of opposition that had been stirred up to the original design. On October 21st, we did find for neighborhood compatibility. We gave it project design approval, feeling that really the applicant and architect have bent over backwards to try to present a really fine plan that fits the lot with all of its constraints. We found that the architectural approach was acceptable. We wanted them to provide an update of the planting on the public easement in coordination with Parks Division staff. We also asked for them to study the fence in the front yard, to study the brick and stone facade, to provide detailing of the rooftop element, provide details of the architecture, and to come back to us with a refined landscape plan. I have been to the site. I've reviewed the story poles. I was very pleased to see that the second story is set back quite a bit from the street view, and look forward to this project coming back to our board so that we can move it along and give it our final approval. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 public speaking slips, and you'll have 2 minutes each. You don't have to use all 2 minutes. So our first speaker today is, and pardon me if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly, Dominic Namnoth? Yes? And you can pull that microphone down a little if it's
Thank you.
uncomfortable.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for having me here today. I am a resident of Santa Barbara. I've lived here since 1981, and I've owned and lived in the house 2 doors down from 2345 since 2007. I'm here today because I feel like I'm a good neighbor, and I'm a friend to a lot of the people that are in the audience today. And I had to question myself when I started thinking about this project. It's like, for the most part, I do take, live and let live sort of approach. And when I saw the project that Michael was looking to do, the thought came to me, it's like, good on him. He's building, a really beautiful home on a lot that he owns, and, he's going to do right by it. My concern was, Michael's never lived there before. He doesn't know what's going on. And I started thinking, well, shame on me if I don't say something, and, thinking that at some point it could have been, I could have called that one, you saw that one coming if there was a mistake or something that wasn't considered. The proposed project, the way I see it, and I see this project 2 or 3 times a day. I walk there every day or go to the beach every day. And so I see this project. When the story poles came up, I wasn't shocked so much because I did realize that it was going to be in very close proximity to the street. In fact, it's the minimum setback from the street as far as the beginning of the property goes. And I thought, wow, that's pretty overwhelming when you walk through there. And then the corridor that it creates going down to the beach is also kind of a imposing structure there. I don't feel that it's in tune with the neighborhood so much. But, Michael and his family is going to enjoy it, I'm sure. But a couple of things that I would tell Michael if I was to tell him this thing is, in 7 years, I've never once dreamt of having a swimming pool. I'm 90 seconds from my front door to the ocean. The climate there just doesn't lend itself well to a swimming pool. If it were me, it'd be a beautiful spa with an eating area, and we can enjoy the sunset and the ocean just as well. Admittedly, there's a lot of constraints on that property. And I think one of the things that it's being created is Mesa Lane and Edgewater is a natural funnel. It's the bottom of the funnel to pedestrians and traffic and vehicles and kids and strollers and runners and joggers and bikers. Everybody goes past that. Backing out of that driveway in such proximity to that corner, I think is a real hazard to people and to Michael as well coming out of there. I know backing out of my driveway can be a bit of a trick, and there is no lighting on that street at night, so it does present somewhat of a hazard. In 7 years on Edgewater, I really enjoy that neighborhood. I enjoy the people that I live with. At some point, I'll be a neighbor and a friend to Michael, and I just want to make sure that, I was able to tell him what I think he should consider when he's doing the project. So
Thank you so much. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Sam Ryan. Is Mr. Ryan here? Come on up, Mr. Ryan. You'll have 2 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, Committee Chairman, members, my wife grew up in our house at 2317 Edgewater Way, so we were long residents in that particular spot. And for the record, my wife and I 100% support Michael's project. It's unfortunate that the chairman of the Single Family Review Board wasn't at the first meeting, because one of her comments at the second meeting was she told Michael, I like that design, you should have fought for it. And I agree. That design was beautiful, and being in compliance, neighborhood friendly, that's a subjective issue. I think that property, the original design, even this design, will do nothing but upgrade the neighborhood from the 1950s style cookie cutter craftsman, cheaply built homes that are there. I know because we have one. And this is nothing but an improvement on the entire neighborhood. It will increase the values of the property, not only financially, but aesthetically. I think it's unfortunate that some of the objections that were raised at the first committee, the information was not broadcast enough, at least in my case. I would have stood up and spoke in favor of that. But because of all the negative people that were there, negative comments, the board, Single Family Review Board, caved in, and I say caved in because they changed everything, made all these recommendations based upon this negative input, because there were no positive input there. If there was information out, I know there would have been positive input there. And as a result, because Mr. Samolsky needs to move on with this project, he consented. He changed it from what was a beautiful design to a craftsman-style design, just to contend with a negative comment. And it's unfortunate that a member of the Single Family Review Board, as chairman of the Neighborhood Watchdog Committee, had presented all these negative comments, when in fact this particular individual has a 7-foot-high fence on her property at the street. And also she has solicited funds from neighbors to support her watchdog group.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Our final speaker is it Kevin Richard? Luciana? Okay.
For having me today. I wasn't planning on speaking. This is my first time going over this project. I live directly across the street on 2300 block of Edgewater. I own a home since 1999, and I have 2 kids. And my reason for being here today is one of your slides when the story poles came up, and my husband and I were looking from our house. We were very, very shocked. And reviewing before the pictures of the house, it is a beautiful idea for a house, I'm sure now, and the first idea, but it's the wrong lot. It's the wrong location for the home. And it is our opinion that if somebody wanted to build such a large home and so close to the street, they should have picked a different location. And I would encourage, if you each have time, just to go to that street, go to 23 Edgewater, and look at the story poles. It really is extremely high. Edgewater is a very natural setting where a lot of people go there every day for walking, biking, and my kids play there, and it's a very natural setting. And how the height of the story poles was extremely shocking to us, and it really blocks a lot of the sky that is there right now. So that's the reason that I'm here today. It's because I've lived there for 15 years, and we are very concerned with the size and how close to the street it is. Again, it's a beautiful design of a home. It's just the wrong location for it. And we're just worried about the visibility of just driving by and seeing a large building. You know, the reason I've lived in Santa Barbara for 25 years is because we like the individual small craftsman's home, which is what made Mesa be what it is today. So thank you very much for your time, and I really encourage, if it's possible, for each of you to at least drive by, because one of the slides that shows this, it is something that made me feel compelled to come here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Thompson has a good point, and just for the public's benefit, the Planning Commission did hold a site visit this Tuesday of this week, where we all were in attendance and walked the property kind of end to end, along with viewing down the Mesa Steps Lane, looking back at the story poles. So, and that's a common practice for us. It's part of the role that we've committed to and we take very seriously, and staff is always prepared and prepares us for that. So that will inform our deliberations today. Thank you for raising that. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Chair Schwartz?
Yes, Ms. Broderson.
Mr. Smolsky, the property owner, has requested some time to speak.
Yes, Mr. Smolsky, thank you for being here today. Come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Smolsky. I'm the new owner.
Maybe pull up the microphone a little so we can hear you better.
My name is Michael Smolsky. I'm the new owner. As you can see, I'm a little taller. That's why I had to pull it up. I'm the new to Santa Barbara, but my wife has been here for quite a while. That's how we actually met. She's been going to UCSB, where that's why we decided to move back to Santa Barbara. You know, the Mesa, we fell in love. We bought it. We had a really great experience in the past with Santa Barbara. We're finding out this is not so anymore. We're having second thoughts, actually. whether to stay, because this is actually very sad to hear neighbors complain about a height of a single-story house by the street. At this point, I'm not really sure what I can do to please the neighbors. I mean, I thought this was my property. I had something to say about it, but I'm finding that is no longer true. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smolsky. Okay, with that, we're going to bring it back to the commission for questions. Let's start with questions. Mr. Thompson?
For staff, or maybe Mr. Zimmerman, normally for design review, you do a survey of the 20 closest properties for size and which are other two-story houses. Do you have that? How many other properties in the neighborhood are larger than is proposed, and how many other ones are 2 stories?
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Thompson, I did not request that. This project FAR is so below, and it's a guideline, so I did not request that, and I don't think the SFDB did either.
Well, okay, thank you.
Ms. Peugeot, you have some questions.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The table in the staff report that shows the existing and proposed site statistics, when it talks about the existing house, it doesn't actually give a height. It just says 2-story. Can either staff or the applicant just give me an idea of what that height is on the existing house today? That would be helpful. Thanks.
Commissioner Peugeot, the existing house is approximately 2 feet below the new second floor. So the new second floor roof is approximately 2 feet higher than the existing house ridge. It's still within the 25-foot required height to have. One thing about the existing house blocking views or seems massive is that there's a high ridge adjacent on the west side. It's a very high ridge. And it's only about 4 feet from the property line. So I think walking down the walkway, I think on the redesigned house, it's going to be less of an impact, than the existing house that's there. Could we have the elevations for a minute?
Mr. Zimmerman, pull the microphone down a little bit.
Oh.
Just, that's, yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
So what I did was the roof itself slopes up away from the property lines here and also there. And then from the front elevation, the roof slopes away from the property lines. And so, some houses that you see, there's a ridge coming out here. And the 25 feet actually happens at the property line. But in this case, the roof slopes away from the property lines, so you have less of an impact.
That's very helpful. Thank you. While you're there, I have one more question about the site plan for you. The proposed location of the pool equipment, I'm not sure if I could really read where it was on the site plans.
It would be in the rear of the house, and we haven't located it as yet. We're thinking about recessing it so that it takes care of any noise or motor running from.
I'm sorry, recessing it. What does that mean?
Well, we'd recess the equipment down into the ground.
Underground?
Yeah, more or less underground.
Between the house and the pool, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it'd be in that location.
In that location?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So you don't, Mr. Zimmerman, to Ms. Peugeot's question, you don't have a preferred or proposed location that perhaps you could at least point to on another slide for us today? Because that may be a question that a number of us have.
So the pool equipment would be located about in here, right here. And that would be next to the walkway. So it'd be located about right there. It would not be in the setback. It'd be out of the setback.
The pool and the spa you're referring to?
Yes,
Both
yes.
of those. Okay. Ms. Peugeot, any additional questions? Take your time.
I have an additional question for staff. This one's directed to staff. I would just like, I was reading in the staff report and didn't quite get what the review to date has been with the Public Works Department in terms of the public right-of-way improvements and any discussions you've had with them. And I was also actually a little confused by some of the condition language describing the public improvements, which is condition, I think it's D1D. I understand most of it, but there's a piece of sidewalk improvement, I think it's 16 feet long or something. I wasn't quite sure what that was. Maybe you could go over that.
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Peugeot, when we reviewed this project as part of the development application review process, Public Works is asking for, in the driveway apron, the driveway will be 16 feet wide, and in that section of the driveway apron, they're asking for the sidewalk to be cut like a sidewalk there in the 16-foot width of the driveway.
So if I understand that correctly, it's those two things are kind of overlapping with each other, is that right?
Yeah, the 16-foot width driveway with the sidewalk.
Is on top of the apron?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had asked questions at our site visit. One was for the applicant, just requesting a location for the proposed trash cans, where that might be, since it won't be inside the minimum size garage. Obviously, it can't be within the setbacks, so that's why I was curious where you were proposing to have that.
It would have to be located in the back. It'd have to be located in the back, either on this side or this side. And there is a walkable surface that comes from the back straight out to the driveway. So there's a walkable surface here, both sides, so it'd be easy to take the cans out, to the street in the front. And it won't be located in the setback. You're not allowed to locate it in the setback. I have one question. I have one comment on the driveway in the front. Do you want to go to the landscape plan? Oh, well, Public Works has not asked for a sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk. They asked for a walking surface so that it blends better with the neighborhood.
I think that was noted in our site visit, correct, Ms. Broadison? Yes.
Chair Schwartz, I just wanted to add the trash enclosure. This project is here today at Planning Commission for local coastal plan for coastal development permit. And if there are some minor site design changes regarding, maybe adjusting the building a little bit to make it more compatible to make the findings, or adding a trash enclosure, what would they say at this SFDB, tweaking the design, that can be done at SFDB, so we can make that a condition of approval. So I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Broadison, for clarifying that. Mr. Bartlett, additional questions at this time?
Yes, I had a question again for the applicant. In looking at the landscape plan, it's indicating that the entire right-of-way beyond the property line abutting the street is, where did I see it here? Decomposed granite, similar to that slide that we just saw previously for the permeable paver demonstration. And yet it defers to the architect's plan for further clarification, and then the architect's plan is silent. So I'm curious what you're really proposing in that zone in the right-of-way in front of your property.
Commissioner Bartlett, are you talking about the where the sidewalk would be, or?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is it a sidewalk? Is it decomposed granite? Is it, I mean, can you put up the landscape plan?
Yeah. Public Works had asked for a walkable surface, so it could be interlocking pavers, or it could be, you know, more of a stepping stone feeling across the front. But it's just not going to be a concrete sidewalk.
Okay. And then that kind of leads to my question that I had posed, I think, at the site visit and to staff about the applicability of the pedestrian master plan, because in reading this, it pretty much says Santa Barbara pedestrian design guideline is issued by the city transportation engineer. Every project that is designed and built in the city of Santa Barbara should conform to these guidelines. And when you go to the 50-foot right-of-way width, it clearly calls out, you know, concrete curb with a parkway, with sidewalk and all of that. So is there something that we got back from transportation specifying that it doesn't need to comply with this on this project? I know the last one we reviewed in the Bluff area of the Mesa, it was included in our package. The Planning Commission opted to not have it required on that case because there were no other sidewalks within about a 2-block radius. It would be the only patch. Where this one, we have sidewalks directly to the west, continuing from the path that goes down to the beach. So it does abut with other sidewalked conditions. So
That's correct, Commissioner Bartlett, and I did clarify with Public Works staff just a moment ago. You'll recall several months ago there was a lot line adjustment project east of this site on Edgewater Way, where at that time Public Works was asking for curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and the Planning Commission opted to not require the sidewalk because there was not sidewalk on either side of it. For various reasons. They will be providing curb, gutter, and I believe a decomposed granite walkway to define the pedestrian space. And this site, there is sidewalk directly west of it at the last part. Well, I think most of Mesa Lane has sidewalk. Public Works staff said in order to maintain the rural appearance of this portion of Edgewater consistent with what was decided on the project east of this site, they recommended that they provide only decomposed granite walking surface rather than sidewalk, I think given past decisions in this area of Edgewater Way.
okay, yeah, that discussion would have been helpful in the staff report. It's just totally silent and left out, so that's why I was asking the question. Thank you.
Mr. Campanella, questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Mr. Zimmerman, if I can. Thank you. I guess what I'm trying to look at is the massing of the building, I guess, from a view standpoint. And I know it's already been spoken about that there wasn't any view issues, but I'm just trying to put things in perspective in my own mind. It appears that the second floor of this unit, including the back terrace, if you will, or walkout, is about 36 feet wide on top, the second floor, by about 40 foot wide if you include the pop-outs and also the balcony to the rear.
Yes, that's correct.
About a 40-foot width.
Mm-hmm.
That 40-foot width is something that's visible, I guess, from the public walkway down to the beach, if you wanted to say that's where the public was going. So it's 40 feet, and if I think it's something like probably flat, the pathway, the public pathway is maybe about 200, just rough calc, about 220 feet before you start to go down the steps to the beach.
That's correct.
So the second floor occupies a total of 40 feet of a 220 feet walkway when somebody's walking by. which to me is pretty minimal, as far as massing, where most people would see what the massing is. Also, when I look at the floor plan, it's a pretty modest floor plan on the second floor.
Yes,
I mean, you've got 10-foot wide dimensions in a secondary bedroom and 12 feet wide in the master. I mean, you've done the best you can to cut that back and still make it livable. And I think you also, when you mentioned the slope on the roof on the west side and the north side, it appears that your secondary areas, whether it be a closet or laundry room, were put under that so that it wouldn't take really away from the livability of the master bedroom, let's say.
Yes.
I guess I'm just trying to confirm that a lot's been done to reduce the size, bulk, and scale of this particular unit and still make the unit livable for the resident and the occupant that's going to spend the money to build it. And I thank you for confirming what I thought I read in the plans. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Campanella, before we go to comments?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Would you like to, we'll just go right back down, if that's all right, if you have, do you have some questions, Ms. Lodge? Thank you.
Chair, what are the plate heights in the house?
The first floor plate height is 9 feet, and the second floor plate height is 8 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner
Ms.
Lodge.
Broadison.
I just want to, it's 9'7" for the first floor, and according to the drawings, an 8'1" for the second floor, just to be on record as accurate.
So there is some wiggle room there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go, if the commission's ready, let's go to comments. And Mr. Campanella, you want to start, and we'll go right down the line? Mr. Thompson, did you have some additional questions before we do that? Okay, Mr. Campanella, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam
Chair
Chair.
Schwartz, I'm sorry, John,
sorry.
Mr. Campanella. On the north elevation, it shows the plate height is 9'7" on the first floor, and on the south elevation, it shows the plate height is 9'1". So there's
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last.
9'1". So it is, Mr. Zimmerman was correct in saying 9 feet, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows, the drawings are 9'7" on the north elevation and 9'1" on the south elevation. So I don't know if that's if that's the way you describe differing sides of the building, or do you know why it's different here? Can you explain?
I think it's 9'1" on the plate height. So we can verify that. Okay.
Mr. Campanella?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my comment is, the reason we're here today and our auspices is really to look at a coastal development permit, whether it complies with our local coastal plan. We have to make findings to that effect. And I think it's come through the Single Family Design Board as relative in 2 renditions as far as design and other size, bulk, scale, and other constraints that they would evaluate. So I think I would be of a position to say that this, based on staff's recommendations and their suggested findings for us to approve, I think it complies with what's needed to get a coastal development permit. Thank you.
Ms. Lodge, comments?
Thank you. I concur in general with Commissioner Campanella's comments. I know it's shocking indeed to see the story poles up, but the building is a little bit higher than the existing building, and simply moving it forward because it's closer to the street, it just makes it much closer to the viewer, and so it seems much bigger. It isn't, actually. And given the constraints of the lot, and it seems reasonable to me that for the owner to be able to, since he can't remodel the existing house, it seems reasonable to allow this particular development in this form. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you. Well, as Commissioner Campanella pointed out, our role here is a coastal development permit. We we probably have opinions, but we don't have purview over the design as long as it's within compliance with the coastal plan, and it is. Given the site constraints that this site has, I think the architect has done an exemplary job in fitting a modest house into a very constrained site. Nothing about it is a mansion, as some people have commented. It's a modest size rooms and so forth, and I have no problem with approving a coastal development permit. It complies with the coastal plan and the city zoning ordinances.
Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I certainly concur with Commissioner Thompson's comments. I feel bad that the applicant has had to design this twice before they could bring it here. I think that they've done a good job given the site constraints, and I think it's a very reasonable proposal after dedicating a couple of years developing the single-family design guidelines. It's certainly well within compliance, and I think the Single-Family Design Board has acknowledged that. So I think that it's ready for the coastal development permit.
Ms. Pujo?
Yes, I as well agree with my colleagues and their comments on this project. It's always a change to a neighborhood when a new structure goes up, but I believe that the Single Family Design Review Board did an excellent job working with the applicants, and I commend the applicants for their willingness to do their best to make this fit in with the neighborhood and also with the natural surroundings of the area, particularly because it's adjacent to a public access way. Moving the house forward does present somewhat more visibility on the street, but for a very good reason. The constraints, but also the protection of the bluff top and the open feel of the Mesa Lane pathway as you go down. So I think those are all good things. I believe the applicants are going to be good neighbors in the neighborhood in general. Are fortunate to have sensitive applicants that were willing to respond to this extent to their concerns. So I also agree that the findings can be made and that the project should be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Pujo. I'll conclude with the unanimous support with my colleagues and to commend the Single Family Design Board in the sense that it's come to a place where it supports the project. However, the twists and turns have led the applicant. And in terms of our findings for today, I can't see one obligation that we have either under our general plan or the local coastal plan requirements that would not be supportable for this project. I also want to say something about neighborhood compatibility. This comes up regularly for the commission and, of course, for our review boards. And it is subjective, and we've heard a number of times from our Assistant City Attorney, Mr. Vincent, that compatibility isn't the same, it's not identical, it's that it fits in with, it's compatible with. And the interesting part about the Mesa, as with almost every neighborhood in Santa Barbara, and this little micro neighborhood within the Mesa, is that within a 2-block radius in every direction, away from the ocean, there are many different types of architectural styles. Whether we have the Sears kit homes on Mesa Lane, or we have sort of an older, funky ranch-style house, or we have some of the newer designs, and that could be more modern. It can be also Spanish style, or a craftsman style, or a Cape Cod style. So this is not a homogeneous neighborhood with just one type of architectural style. And I think what Mr. Zimmerman, Mr. Smolsky, you've proposed is absolutely compatible and fitting within the neighborhood. And as we stood at the Mesa Lane steps, so I want to talk about viewshed public views, which is within the purview of the Planning Commission and required for consideration under the Coastal Act. I actually believe that the fact that you've needed to pull the new development back towards Edgewater, and that you've moved it or angled it in such a way, I know you didn't want to, but the fact that you've had to angle it in such a way away from that view, that public view down to the ocean, will actually improve the public view shed to the ocean. So unintended but positive consequence, and again, I know it was some hardship for you, Mr. Smolsky, but I actually think there will be a public benefit in the development that I hope you will get approved. And lastly, regarding this, the new development being too close to the street, there are many, many homes on the Mesa and in this neighborhood, within the Mesa in particular, that are right up against the street. So this is not an anomaly, and therefore, again, it's very compatible. So I, too, am going to support what I think is going to be a forthcoming motion, and I'll look forward to Ms. Lodge making that motion.
I'll be glad to make the motion, but I do have a question for staff, if I may.
Certainly.
At the site visit, we were told that Mr. Smolsky said that he would take care of landscaping planted in the area that just has chips on it now. And you see, he's nodding his head. He said he would water the plants and so on. And I understand that Parks said they didn't want any landscaping. Could the Planning Commission make a recommendation to the Parks Department that since we have someone willing to take care of the plants, and since there are some California natives that grow slowly, are extremely tidy, are extremely appropriate. There's one in particular, lemonade berry, which grows best at the beach, with salt spray and so on, that could be planted there. That would make it a much more welcoming entry to the pathway. To me, it looks so stark.
Thanks for bringing that, because that was identified. Before staff comments, I would like to hear from Mr. Vincent, because it's in the public right-of-way, the city's responsibility. Is there any consideration that we should keep in mind before pondering Ms. Lodge's remark?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I think that not having the benefit of the thinking from Parks and Recreation's point, I'm kind of at a loss as to exactly how to advise the Commission. There are examples where private property owners have made commitments to maintain either improvements, whether it's landscaping or hardscape, on public property. The flip side of that is that if you have that commitment, that would need to be a commitment that would run with the land. So if this property were sold to another property owner, that commitment would continue, or we'd have to recognize that that commitment might go away and then anticipate and plan for the end of that commitment. So I just don't know what Parks and Rec's thinking is right now as to why they would not want to take that opportunity. But I assume
But
it's
would that be
for some
the
reason.
type of decision that perhaps, just as a comment, could go back to single-family design? Again, they're designing, and we're, trying to stay within our purview here today. Is Ms. Broadison or Ms. Brooke, any thoughts for us before
Madam
we?
Chair, I would just offer that I think if we can talk to Parks and Recreation staff, we will do that for sure. I wouldn't want to burden this project with any type of condition, something that would be ultimately up to staff to decide yes or no. But we can definitely take that back to staff. I know during the review of this project, Parks and Recreation staff did want to make sure that the owner was not going to plant anything on the fence that the
Right, we heard that at the site visit,
department
yes.
would have to maintain. And so we can have further conversations with them and with the owner's willingness and see where that goes, but I wouldn't want to actually burden the project by making it a condition of approval or something that he has no control of whether it's fulfilled or not.
Okay, well, I think that sounds reasonable, but Ms. Lodge was going to make a motion, so how do you feel about leaving that out of the motion and relying on staff to carry that forward with?
I will rely on staff to carry that forward, and we have the representative from the Single Family Design Review Board as well here, and maybe with a little pushing here and there, we could get that to happen. I think it seems to me the obvious reason Parks and Rec doesn't want to have the landscaping there is it's something more for them to maintain. But it seems to me that if you've got the property owner, and it's interesting to know that there have been times when that has been made a condition, or that the city has entered into an agreement with private property owners to maintain something on public land. It wouldn't be a first.
Well, we certainly see it around town. I mean, we have private property owners caring for some public right-of-way areas. I see this on Chapala, the neighborhood Ms. Peugeot and I live, Upper Chapala. But at the same time, I've also seen some of these areas where perhaps the property has turned over, and now that area is falling into a state of neglect, and there are weeds growing now, but it's public, so now the city has to step in if there are complaints about weed abatement. And so it sounds to me like it's more of a discussion that staff really needs to have with Park and Rec, and how are we handling this elsewhere in the city to make sure there aren't any unintended consequences, as they say. But if staff has noted that, then Ms. Lodge, if you're still comfortable moving forward with the motion, I'd be glad to entertain that.
I move that we concur with the staff recommendation, approve the coastal development permit for this project. Let's make the findings that it's consistent with all the applicable policies of the city's local coastal plan, all applicable implementing guidelines, and all applicable provisions of the code, because the addition, it says that the addition is compatible with the surrounding family. That should be the project. It says addition. The language here under 2 on page 8.
That's sufficient, Ms. Broadison, before we go to a second? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
And subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A.
In Exhibit A?
Yes, and subject to the conditions of approval.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Ms. Peugeot, you have your light on?
Second.
I'll second.
Ms. Peugeot has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. You have a project, and this project is appealable within 10 business days. Thank you.
Calendar.
Excuse me, 10 calendar
Very
days.
much.
Thank you, Ms.
I'd like to comment on Kelly working as a planner with us. She did a great job.
Oh, thank you for that. Ms. Broadison, did you hear that compliment? We want to make sure it's duly noted. Thank you. And Mr. Smolsky, welcome to Santa Barbara, or welcome back to Santa Barbara. Okay, with that, we'll let the members of the public find their way out of chambers before we go to our last items. So this is the administrative agenda of our day, and we're going to consider committee and liaison reports. A staff hearing officer report would be from Mr. Jordan, but he had to step out and recuse himself, so he'll give us that report next Thursday, the 20th. Are there other committee and liaison reports? Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Historic Landmarks Commission continues to work on nominating properties for landmark status, and at their last meeting yesterday, they reviewed again the La Entrada plans, and they were presented with the design for the former California Hotel. The applicant brought photographs of the original one, which has between the towers that were on the corners a great big sign that says Hotel California, and the applicant, I think, with understanding, with tongue-in-cheek, that they'd really like to put that back, but I don't think they got any support from the commission. And then the Parks and Recreation Commission, at their last meeting, something that they often do, they considered applications for permits to remove trees and turn both of them down, remembering the importance and the value of trees, and trees of any size. They're really, they made some recommendations on how they might be handled to make them safer, but otherwise, that was most of what they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Other committee reports. Ms. Peugeot, your light is on.
Nope. I don't have a report, but I have an announcement, if I could. Okay. Just wanted to announce that there is a Kids Draw Architecture set of sketch sessions coming up in Santa Barbara. The Kids Draw Architecture is a program of the Architectural Foundation in Santa Barbara, and it's free to the public. There's one that will be taking place at the Santa Barbara Mission at on April 5th. These are both Saturdays. And another one at the Music Academy at April 12th. They're both 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And if you've never been to one, they're for youth of all ages. And it's a wonderful afternoon in front of beautiful Santa Barbara public and quasi-public buildings. Local architects come and sit with the kids and help them design and draw what they see. And they come up with some fascinating, interesting results, which are displayed in a gallery opening at the end of the year. And also some are selected for a yearly calendar. So I wanted to relay the information about that. And if anyone would like additional information on those, they're welcome to call the Architectural Foundation office. They could talk to Nancy Capone, the executive director, and that's at 965-8907. They also have a website, or just show up. And it's, like I said, it's free and available to the public. It's a wonderful community resource. And just finally, to that end, the foundation and the program would like to distribute some calendars to our fellow commissioners so you can get an idea of what the yearly calendar that they produce is. They're lovely drawings, all by children of the local Santa Barbara buildings. So I'll pass some of these down. There might be a few available for staff too if they wish.
Great. I'll donate mine to Mr. Vincent since I have one, since I was involved with that at the holiday last year. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. The Single Family Design Board's been staying reasonably busy. There's only one item that I think might be of interest to the commission. At the last meeting, or maybe it was a meeting before last, there was a discussion on statistics in the aftermath of the T-Fire rebuild. And there's a remaining about 30 properties that have not been sold and rebuilt, or rebuilt by the owners that lost their houses in the fire. Some of those are of concern to the neighborhoods because there's some pretty very visible derelict foundations that remain. So after a discussion, they left it that the staff was going to contact the property owners involved with the properties that hadn't been rebuilt to find out what the issues are. Is it financing, lack of insurance money? They're out of the area and don't really care. Whatever, even if it's city processes that is intimidating to them. So when that results comes back to the design board, I'll bring it to the commission here. But 30 out of 210 properties is a pretty significant number that were not rebuilt yet in 5 years. So it's somewhat of concern to the design board and to some of the staff.
Thank you so much. On Monday of this week, I attended the Water Commission meeting. Again, it was a packed house of interested parties, including representatives of the various regional water districts, special districts, along with members of the public and the media. And as you can see from our local media, water is a topic every day in every outlet. So we are unfortunately in an evolutionary phase from moving from a stage 1 drought to consideration of stage 2, given that the recent rainfall was not sufficient in any way to alleviate our drought conditions. The preliminary results from our Public Works Department is that the City of Santa Barbara water users are not sufficiently additionally conserving at the rate that we need. So that department and City Council will need to undertake discussions about what the next steps are for us. Additionally, we had some disappointing news that our water broker was not able to secure a bid. Apparently, there were over 35 bidders for some Northern California water, and we were something around the 32nd bid. You know, it's like gold at this point, and some water districts, municipalities are offering unbelievable amounts of money, far beyond what anybody could possibly have imagined almost for the scant water that's available around the state. So the bidding war is on. And unfortunately, the combined effort by Montecito and Santa Barbara in this most recent bid fell far short. So Mr. Hagmark, Joshua Hagmark, mentioned that staff is going back to the drawing board, sharpening their pencils, talking with the mayor and the council about what else can be done. But this is front and center, of course, for our staff in that regard. Lastly, I'd like to announce an invitation that the Planning Commission received, but this is certainly open to members of the public on Thursday, April 10th. People Self-Help Housing is going to be conducting a groundbreaking of 43 new affordable apartments in Carpinteria. Casas de las Flores is the name. It's the formerly Carpinteria Camper Park. On April 10th, ceremony at 11:30 a.m., followed by a light lunch. And there is a suggested RSVP by April 7th. I'll give you the phone number. Everybody can call and RSVP to Monica. It's 805-699-7220. Thank you. Unless there is anything else from staff, Ms. Brooke, Mr. Campanella, you had something.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have a couple of reports. Sorry. I have a couple of
I'm
reports.
sorry, I thought we started with you. I really apologize.
That's no problem. Thank you. I attended on March 3rd the Architectural Board of Review. I think it's the third or fourth meeting on 3885, 3887 State Street, the AUD project called Marisol. And I believe Commissioner Bartlett at our joint meeting mentioned about staff reports for these type of projects, which staff intended to do for the design review boards, and it was a very complete report. So I think we will appreciate seeing them from staff when they prepare them on behalf of either HLC or ABR. The staff report did recommend that the ABR consider sending the project to Planning Commission for review, for a review on certain items, or the conceptual type review or comment review that's part of the ordinance, and gave their reasons for that. They went through the ABR program, the intent, design review status. So it's a very, very complete report that was prepared. By a vote of 3-2, the ABR decided not to send it to Planning Commission. And my own impression on two of the votes, the reason for sending it was not so much a problem, but as much as a procedural situation that they had in their mind. Should it go or should it not go for some type of affirmation? The only comment that was made on why it might go here would be for questions of traffic, let's say, which wasn't under their purview. And I don't know where that resides or how that's going to happen during the approval process. So I don't know if we will speak on that or not in the future. It depends on, I guess, what comes out of other reviews that are done by the departments. Secondly, I went to the Sustainability Committee meeting, Sustainability Council Committee meeting on March 11th. And there were a couple of items of interest that were presented. One was a pilot program that's being initiated by Rob Dayton is really spearheading it in Public Works, where a couple of sites are going to be selected for, call it corral parking for bicycles that are done in some similar cities here in the U.S. in downtown areas or in Europe, if you've seen them. The idea would be to get a more efficient use of space for parking bikes rather than horizontally to the curb with the posts. The areas that were selected was the 100 block of Canon Perdido, and that was with the full support of Sojourner, CS Cheese, Handlebar Coffee, those actual property owners and people that use the property in that respect. And what it would do would take out several parking spaces on the street that are parallel parking, and just by method of lining, allow maybe 20, 25 bikes, 15 bikes, depending, to park perpendicular to the curb with racks of some type proposed set on the curb to allow a greater number of bikes to park there that use those premises rather than just a few bikes that could be parked now on the post. That was one. And then the second area was on Gray Avenue down in the Funk Zone, which currently out front has some deficient parking, if you might. There's no sidewalk in front of this building. It's just some perpendicular parking that goes on. And this particular building, I believe, is going to go through a change from auto repair to more of a funk zone type motif, an art gallery and wine gallery. So there's an opportunity there at this point to put also a similar corral for parking, especially with young people that use the site down there. There was a lot of encouragement for it, and see if the pilot works and try to see if that gets presented elsewhere. The second item of interest was down in the marina. They're going to change from one electrical bill that gets allocated out, or it gets included in the rent. I don't use it, so I don't know all the particulars. But the key point was it's going to be sub-metered to the actual boat slips. And they're putting that equipment in. There's an estimate that the efficiency that will be done by that would save about $190,000 a year. And people were a significant number of kilowatt hours would be saved as well by people being more efficient when they're on their own meter at their slip. And the third item would be today's Downtown Parking Committee meeting. The staff went over the operating and capital budget for fiscal 15, which would be the year ending in June 2015. Major point was that they continue to generate a surplus that can be from operations that can continue to be used to fund capital items as they come up. Second item was they're looking on to improve parking lot 10 that would come through by the Habit, if you will, and Blush in order to improve the pedestrian experience as they leave their cars in the parking lot. And it seems that there's a number of people working on landscaping and hardscape and logistics in order to try to make that a more pleasant environment to get out to State Street. Thank you.
On that bicycle corral pilot project, this really started last year. I want to give a shout out to the city because when 8 business owners signed a petition and brought forward their desire to swap out some of the parking spaces for bicycles because so much of their customer base is bicycle-centric in that 100 block of East Cannon Perdido, Sarah Grant and others from Public Works, along with Browning Allen, were very responsive, and that's what's ultimately resulted in this exciting pilot project. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out, and I know the business owners are very pleased. With that, I'll just announce that stay tuned for, of course, any changes that might appear to our schedule on the city website, but at this time, the Planning Commission is scheduled to come back for a meeting next Thursday. That's March 20th. Our 1 o'clock item and our only item that day currently is scheduled to be the El Estero Aeration Basin. That's at 520 East Yananali, and that will be for a coastal development permit, excuse me. Ms. Brooke, did you have any other closing comments about our schedule, or is that it for today? Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much. Our meeting is adjourned.
Your goodbye left me with eyes that cried. Now I'm lost without you. And now that you took that part that used to be my heart, all of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm a mess without you? You took the part that used to be my heart, so why not take all of me?
sweet so that I could hardly speak. And I seem to find the happiness I see when we're out together dancing.